The capture. The Sakari Empire, known across the galaxy for its cruelty and advanced technology, had set their eyes on humanity. They saw humans as nothing more than weak, primitive creatures. The Sakari had long been searching for ways to assert their dominance over other species, and Earth was next on their list. They believed that capturing humans would be an easy task, an opportunity to flaunt their power. The night was dark and silent as the Sakari fleet approached Earth's atmosphere. A fleet of sleek, dark ships descended quickly upon an unsuspecting human vessel in the far reaches of space. It was a deep space research ship, the Seraphis, carrying a small crew of scientists and engineers. The crew had no idea what was coming. Captain Alex Andrews stood on the bridge of the Seraphis, staring at the stars. His fingers drummed lightly on the control panel, his mind focused on the mission. They were exploring a distant part of space, gathering data from uncharted regions. The quiet hum of the ship was comforting, but Andrews couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There had been strange readings on the scanners, something that didn't belong. "Captain, we're picking up an unusual signal," said Sarah, the ship's young engineer. Her fingers flew across the console, her eyes wide with concern. It's not from any known source. It's alien." Andrews narrowed his eyes, suddenly alert. "What do you mean, alien?" "I don't know, Captain. It's definitely not human technology. It's something else. It's moving toward us." Before Andrews could respond, the ship shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. A loud metallic screech filled the air. The ship's lights flickered, then went out completely, plunging the crew into darkness. The emergency lights came on, casting a red glow over the control room. Sarah and the other crew members scrambled to their feet, their faces pale with fear. "What the hell was that?" Andrews demanded, gripping the edge of his seat. "It's them," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "They're here." Outside, the Sakari fleet emerged from the shadows of deep space. Their ships were sleek and terrifying, designed for intimidation. The alien ships encircled the Seraphis, cutting off any possibility of escape. The humans had no choice but to surrender. "Captain, we've been boarded," one of the crew members yelled. The sound of alien footsteps echoed through the halls of the ship. The Sakari had already infiltrated the Seraphis. Andrew's heart raced. He had trained for moments like this, but never thought it would come to pass. "Get to the escape pods," he shouted, trying to keep his calm. But before anyone could react, the doors to the bridge burst open. A group of Sakari soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised. Their armor gleamed under the emergency lights, their reptilian eyes glowing with malice. "We are the Sakari," one of the soldiers growled in a low, menacing voice. "You will submit to us, human. Surrender your ship and your crew. Resistance is pointless." Andrews stood tall, his mind racing for a solution. He knew he couldn't win a fight against these aliens. Not now, not with his crew unprepared. His only choice was to negotiate, to stall for time. "You've made a mistake," he said, trying to sound confident. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The Sakari laughed, their cold eyes showing no sign of fear. "You are nothing but insects to us. We will take you as hostages. Your species will be brought to heel, just like the others." Andrew's stomach churned. He knew that once the Sakari took them, it would be a nightmare. They had taken countless other species before, enslaving them, using them for cruel experiments. He couldn't let that happen to his crew. Not if he could help it. "Sarah," Andrews whispered urgently, "get to the engine room. See if you can sabotage the ship. Delay them." Sarah nodded and quickly ran out of the room. The rest of the crew was already being rounded up by the alien soldiers. The Sakari leader, a towering alien with jagged, silvery scales, stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Andrews. "You will be taken to the prison chambers," the alien said. "You will watch as your kind submits to us." But Andrews wasn't about to give up. He could already feel a plan forming in his mind. They might be captured, but they weren't broken. Not yet. The aliens dragged the crew from the bridge, locking them in a containment chamber. Andrews glanced around, looking for any opportunity to escape, to fight back. The ship was theirs for now, but he wouldn't let it stay that way. As the door slammed shut behind him, Andrews clenched his fists. "We're not done yet," he muttered to himself. "We're just getting started." The Exakari may have thought they had won, but they had made a huge mistake. They had underestimated humanity. The first surprise. The Exakari had secured the Seraphis in their grasp, but they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated the humans. In their arrogance, they believed that taking humans as prisoners would be simple. But even in captivity, the human spirit refused to be broken. Captain Andrews sat in the dimly lit containment chamber, staring at the cold metal walls that surrounded him. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. The Exakari were strong and ruthless, but they didn't know humans the way he did. Humans were survivors. They fought through everything, no matter how impossible it seemed. He glanced over at the rest of the crew, who were all locked in nearby cells. Their faces were tired, but there was a spark in their eyes, a spark that told Andrews they weren't giving up. Not yet. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He could only hope that she was doing what he had instructed her to do, finding a way to sabotage the ship from the inside. He knew that she was the ship's most skilled engineer, and if anyone could outsmart the aliens, it was her. If anyone could find a way to delay the Exakari, it was Sarah. Meanwhile, the Exakari made themselves at home. They didn't seem worried. Their leader, Sathor, a massive alien with sharp, jagged scales and piercing eyes, paced around the containment area. His soldiers, fierce and intimidating, kept watch over the humans. They laughed among themselves, thinking that they had won. "They won't last long," one of the Exakari soldiers said, his voice deep and menacing. "They'll break under our control. They always do." But Sathor didn't seem convinced. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the humans. He could sense something different about this group, something that didn't fit the usual pattern of their prisoners. The humans were not cowering. They were alert. They weren't broken, not yet. "They are stronger than they look," Sathor muttered to himself. As the Exakari soldiers patrolled, Sarah had already found her way to the ship's engine room. Quietly and carefully, she worked to rewire the ship's systems. She knew the aliens would be monitoring their power levels, so she made sure her work was subtle. She cut some wires, rerouted others, and started to disable certain sections of the ship, all the while being mindful of the Exakari's security cameras. Every action was calculated. Every move was precise. But she wasn't alone. As she worked, another crew member, Lieutenant Mark, snuck into the engine room. His face was bruised from the earlier scuffle, but his eyes were filled with determination. "We need to hurry," Mark said in a low voice. "If we don't act now, it'll be too late." Sarah nodded. "I've almost got it. Just a little longer." Mark kept watch, glancing nervously over his shoulder. He knew that every second they wasted brought them closer to the Exakari realizing what they were doing. The humans didn't have much time. Meanwhile, back in the containment area, Andrew's thoughts were racing. The Exakari believed they had them trapped, but Andrews knew there was more to the humans than met the eye. He had seen the strength of his crew. They were resourceful, quick thinkers, and they wouldn't give up without a fight. "Captain," one of the crew members, Lieutenant Ramirez, whispered from the cell next to him. "I have an idea." Andrews leaned closer. "What is it?" "Maybe we can use their overconfidence against them," Ramirez said, his voice low. "They're watching us, but they don't know we're already planning. If we can somehow disrupt their communication systems, it might buy us the time we need to escape." Andrew's eyes lit up. "I like it. How do we do it?" "I'm not sure yet," Ramirez admitted. "But I have a feeling Sarah can help us. She's smart. If she's disabling their systems, maybe we can send a signal back to Earth. We could make the Exakari think we're cooperating, Get them to drop their guard. Andrews smiled, a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. We'll give it a try. We can't let them think they've won. As the minutes ticked by, the tension on the ship grew. The Xakari were too confident. They were too sure that their control was absolute. But what they didn't know was that every moment that passed was one where the humans were working, silently plotting their escape. Sarah's sabotage in the engine room continued to go unnoticed by the Xakari. The ship's power systems were flickering, barely holding together. Soon, everything would be ready. The humans weren't just prisoners. They were the ones in control. Back in the containment area, Captain Andrews could feel the shift in the air. The humans were no longer just waiting for their fate. They were preparing for the fight of their lives. And soon, the Xakari would find out just how big a mistake they had made by capturing humans. The aliens' mistake. The Xakari were too confident. They believed their victory was already sealed, that the humans would submit to their rule just like every other species they had captured. But they made a mistake, one they wouldn't realize until it was too late. In the depths of the Sirius, the ship was beginning to tremble. The lights flickered intermittently, and the power grid showed signs of instability. It wasn't obvious at first, but it didn't take long for the aliens to notice. Their leader, Sather, stood in front of the main control console. His eyes narrowed. He watched as the energy levels fluctuated, his mind racing to understand what was happening. "Commander," one of his soldiers said, stepping forward, "there are power surges all over the ship. The systems are failing." Sather's reptilian eyes gleamed with suspicion. "What do you mean, failing?" "Our systems are invincible." "We don't know," the soldier replied. "But there are fluctuations in the power grids, and some of our communications are being jammed." Zathor growled in frustration. How could this be happening? He looked toward the holding cells, where the humans were confined. He had suspected something was off with this crew. They weren't reacting as most of the other species had. They were smart, clever. Now, with the ship's systems malfunctioning, Sather had a bad feeling. He turned sharply to his second-in-command. "Double the guard around the prisoners. They must be the cause of this. Find out what they're doing." Meanwhile, inside the containment area, Andrews and his crew could sense the change in the air. The power was flickering, the artificial gravity systems seemed unstable, and the ship was groaning under the strain. The alien guards were becoming nervous, their steps more frantic as they patrolled the hallway. They were starting to feel the pressure, and that was exactly what the humans wanted. "I think it's working," Captain Andrews said under his breath, nodding to Lieutenant Ramirez, who was working furiously on a small console hidden inside his cell. They had managed to hack into the ship's communication system, sending a coded message to Earth, hoping to alert them to their situation. The Xakari were distracted, believing the humans were broken. They were wrong. "We've got to move fast," Ramirez muttered. "I've bypassed their communications, but they'll catch on soon enough. We need to get to the bridge before they realize what's happening." Andrews clenched his fists. "Not yet. We need to keep them guessing. The longer we keep them distracted, the better our chances." On the other side of the ship, Sarah's sabotage was beginning to take effect. She had already hacked into the engine room's core systems, setting up a series of disruptions. She didn't want to destroy the ship, not yet anyway, but she needed to slow the Xakari down, give them a taste of the chaos they were causing. She smiled to herself as she watched the ship's power grids flicker once again. She could feel the pulse of the ship, the hum of the engines beneath her feet, and she knew that in just a few moments, the aliens would be faced with a critical choice: pursue the humans or try to fix their ship before it fell apart. Outside, in the halls of the Sirius, the Xakari were beginning to panic. Their flawless control over the ship was slipping away. They had underestimated the humans. They thought they could trap them easily, that the humans would break under their force. But they hadn't realized that humans weren't so easily defeated. "We have to stop them," Sather barked, his voice filled with rage. seal off the engine room, cut off their access to the control systems. But it was already too late. Sarah's hacking had disabled the locks on the doors to the containment area, and Andrews saw the opportunity. He glanced around at his crew, who had been silently waiting, watching the chaos unfold. They had been ready for this moment. Now, it was time to act. "Let's go," Andrews said firmly. He gave a signal, and the crew moved quickly, silently. They had a limited window of time before the Zachary realized they were no longer in control. With a few swift movements, the crew broke free from their cells, moving like a well-trained unit. They gathered at the door, each one ready to fight for their lives. The Zachary may have had the numbers, but the humans had something far more dangerous: determination. They burst out into the hall, catching the alien guards by surprise. The aliens scrambled to react, but the humans were too quick, using the chaos of the failing ship systems to their advantage. Andrews led the way, his mind focused on one goal: reach the bridge and regain control of the ship. But as the humans fought their way through the corridors, they could hear the Zachary scrambling to regroup. The aliens were angry, desperate, turning the tables. The Seraphis was in chaos. Power surges rattled through the ship, systems were malfunctioning, and the Zachary were starting to panic. They were scrambling to fix the damage caused by the humans, but they were too late. Captain Andrews and his crew had already turned the tables, and they weren't about to stop now. "Move," Andrews commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The crew moved in perfect synchronization, their training kicking in as they pushed through the hallways, taking down any Zachary guards they encountered. They used the ship's layout to their advantage, knowing the dark corners and narrow passageways where they could ambush the aliens. Every step was calculated, every move a part of their plan. "We're almost to the bridge," Ramirez said, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes were focused, alert. He was leading the way, keeping the crew on track. "But we need to get to the control room before they realize what's happening." "I know," Andrews replied. "Keep going." The humans had learned the layout of the ship quickly. They had been studying the plans before the capture, and that knowledge was paying off now. They had expected something like this to happen, an opportunity to fight back, to escape. But even as they pressed forward, they knew their window was small. The Zachary were powerful, and their numbers were greater. But Andrews had one thing the aliens didn't: the element of surprise. The Zachary thought they had already won. They thought the humans were weak, just another species to control. They had no idea what they were up against. In the engine room, Sarah's work was finally coming to fruition. The ship's systems were failing faster now, and the Zachary were struggling to regain control. She had disabled the weapons systems, which meant the aliens couldn't call for reinforcements or launch an attack on Earth. The ship was in a state of disarray, and the humans were in the perfect position to make their move. "We've got a shot at this," Sarah muttered to herself as she watched the control screens flicker and go dark. The alien soldiers would soon realize they couldn't stop the ship's systems from falling apart. Sarah knew that was when the humans had to strike. Back in the corridors, Captain Andrews' crew reached the control room. The door was locked, but that didn't stop them. Lieutenant Mark had already worked out a way to hack into the door's security system, overriding the Zachary's lock. The moment the door slid open, they burst in, weapons raised and ready. The Zachary were caught off guard. They hadn't expected the humans to break into the control room so soon. Zathar, their leader, was there, standing in front of the main console. He had been watching the chaos unfold on the ship's monitors, but now he realized that he had no control over the situation. "Impossible," Zathar growled. "How could you have gotten this far?" "Humans aren't as easy to control as you think," Andrews said with a calm, unwavering voice. "You should have learned that before you took us as prisoners." Zathar's eyes flashed with anger. He reached for a weapon at his side, but before he could react, Lieutenant Ramirez fired a shot, disarming him in one swift movement. The Zachary leader staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Now, we take control," Andrews said firmly. He gestured to the crew. "Secure the room. We don't know how many Sakari are left." The humans quickly secured the control room, making sure no aliens were left to fight back. Zathor was captured, and with him, the fate of the Seraphis and its crew was sealed. But even with the leader taken, the danger wasn't over. The Sakari still had a considerable presence on the ship. The humans had fought hard to get this far, but they knew there was still a long way to go. They had to act quickly, before the aliens could regroup and retake control. Andrews turned to his crew. "We've won the first battle, but we still need to escape. Get to the escape pods. We'll send a distress signal to Earth once we're clear." Sarah, who had just finished her work in the engine room, joined the group. "I've set the ship to auto-destruct if the aliens try to take control again. We won't let them turn it back on." "Good work, Sarah," Andrews said, his eyes scanning the control room's monitors. "Let's get to those pods." The humans, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, had turned the tables. They had fought back with everything they had, and now they were in control. The Sakari had underestimated them, and that would be their downfall. The aliens' fury. Zathor, the once confident leader of the Sakari, was now a prisoner. His once fearsome warriors, who had terrorized countless worlds, were retreating, their morale shattered. The humans had turned the tables, and the Sakari were scrambling to regain control of the ship. It was a bitter pill for them to swallow, one that would cost them dearly. Back in the control room, Captain Andrews stood over Zathor, who was now bound and kneeling before him. The alien leader's reptilian eyes burned with rage, his scales twitching with fury. His sharp teeth ground together in frustration. He had never faced a defeat like this before, especially not at the hands of a species he had dismissed as weak and insignificant. "You may have won this round, human," Zathor hissed, his voice low and venomous. "But you have no idea what you've unleashed. My empire is vast, and it will not forget this humiliation. Your species will suffer for your defiance." Andrews stepped closer, his voice cold and resolute. "We're not scared of your empire, Zathor. You'll never have the chance to destroy us. We're not just going to sit back and let you take what's ours." As the Sakari leader struggled against his restraints, the humans worked quickly, securing control over the ship. The power systems were still unstable, but they had gained enough leverage to keep the Sakari from launching a counterattack. The ship's weapons were offline, and its communications were scrambled. For now, the humans had the upper hand. But the Sakari weren't done yet. They were proud, ruthless, and cunning. They would not go down without a fight. Andrews knew that the next move was crucial. They needed to make sure the Sakari couldn't retake the ship. "Get to the weapons systems," he ordered his crew. "Make sure they can't use anything against us. We'll hold them off until we're out of here." As the crew moved out, a voice crackled over the intercom. It was Zathor, his tone dripping with malice. "You may control this ship for now, humans, but know this, there are millions of us, and we will come for you. You cannot hide forever." His words sent a chill down Andrew's spine, but he pushed the fear aside. He had a mission to complete. The fate of his crew, and the fate of Earth, depended on it. Elsewhere on the ship, chaos was unfolding. The Sakari warriors, realizing that their leader had been captured, began to retreat to the lower levels. They were regrouping, trying to find a way to launch a counterattack. Their pride had been wounded, but their determination was fierce. "We need to regroup," one of the Sakari soldiers said to his comrades. "We will reclaim this ship. The humans are nothing but insects. We will crush them." As the Sakari soldiers hastily moved through the corridors, the humans had already started setting their own traps. They knew the Sakari would try to retaliate, and they were ready. Captain Andrews' crew had set up barricades, disabled doors, and rigged some sections of the ship with makeshift traps. They weren't just going to fight. They were going to make sure the Sakari couldn't get a single inch of ground. The first Sakari soldiers to step into one of the ambush zones were caught off guard. They had no idea what hit them. Human-made traps sent aliens stumbling into walls. Wires exploded with sparks, and barricades slammed down to trap them. The Sakari warriors, though stronger and more advanced, were disoriented and unprepared for the clever human tactics. "Keep moving," Zathor shouted through the intercom, his voice full of desperation. "The humans are trying to outsmart us, but they can't last forever. We will crush them. We will make them regret this." But with every step they took, the Sakari grew more frustrated. The humans were everywhere. They were fast, resourceful, and they had already proven that they weren't afraid to fight back. The Sakari couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing control, and that terrified them. Meanwhile, Andrews and his crew made their way toward the escape pods. They had accomplished the first part of their mission, but they couldn't stay on the ship forever. The Seraphis was still vulnerable, and if they didn't leave soon, the Sakari would retake it. "We're almost there," Andrews said, glancing at his crew. "Stay sharp. The Sakari will be coming for us. We don't have much time." As they reached the escape pod bay, the ship shook violently once again. A loud, gut-wrenching roar echoed through the halls. It was the sound of an alien fury. The Sakari were coming, and they weren't going down without a fight. Andrews turned to his crew, his eyes hard. "This is it. We leave now, or we die here. We fight for our freedom. For Earth." The crew nodded, their resolve firm. The Seraphis may have been taken over by the Sakari once, but now it was the humans who were in control. They were ready to face whatever the aliens threw at them, even if it meant giving everything they had to protect their world. The final showdown. The countdown to escape was ticking, but Andrews knew that time was running out. The Sakari had lost their leader, but they still held the ship in a stranglehold, determined to reclaim it at any cost. The ship shook again as the aliens launched one last desperate attempt to break through the barricades the humans had set up. It was now or never. There was no more room for hesitation. Captain Andrews led the charge, his crew following him closely through the tight corridors of the Seraphis. The escape pods were just ahead, but they had to get past one final obstacle, a team of elite Sakari soldiers blocking their path. These warriors were the best of the best, trained for exactly this kind of fight. They had been sent to stop the humans from reaching the escape pods, and they would not hesitate to destroy them. The tension in the air was palpable as the two sides faced off. The humans, armed with whatever makeshift weapons they had found, stood strong. The Sakari soldiers, heavily armored and armed with advanced weaponry, stared back, their eyes filled with cold fury. There would be no mercy. "Get ready," Andrews whispered to his crew. "We fight for our freedom, no matter what it costs." Before anyone could react, the Sakari charged, their weapons blazing. The humans immediately returned fire, using the limited cover around them to their advantage. It was a battle of wits and strategy, one that the humans had learned to excel in. While the Sakari were physically superior, the humans had something more important: determination. The clash of weapons echoed through the halls. The Sakari soldiers were fast and strong, but the humans were resourceful. They dodged the blasts, firing back with precision, and taking down one alien after another. The humans' teamwork and ingenuity were proving to be a deadly match for the aliens' raw power. But as the battle raged on, Zathor's voice once again crackled over the intercom. His rage was unmistakable. "You cannot win, humans. We will not let you escape. Your kind will be crushed, and your victory will be a fleeting memory." The words sent a shiver down Andrew's spine, but he didn't let them distract him. "Stay focused," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not just fighting for our survival. We're fighting for our future. We will not let them win." Andrews knew that this was the final showdown. The aliens were desperate, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that the humans didn't get away. But the crew of the Seraphis wasn't backing down. Not now. As the last of the Thackeray soldiers fell, the humans pressed forward, but they were far from safe. The ship was still unstable, its systems failing under the pressure of the battle. The lights flickered, and the artificial gravity systems wavered. But Andrews and his crew didn't slow down. They had one goal now: to reach the escape pods and get off the ship before it was too late. They burst into the escape pod bay, only to find that the Thackeray had one last trick up their sleeves. The pod doors were sealed, and the countdown to launch was nowhere in sight. The aliens had locked them in. It was a final trap. "Sarah," Andrews shouted, "can you override the system?" Sarah, breathless from the battle but determined as ever, rushed forward to the control panel. "I'm on it," she said, her fingers flying over the interface. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever as the countdown continued to tick down. She was fighting against the clock, against the Thackeray, and against the very ship that seemed determined to destroy them. Come on," Sarah muttered, her eyes glued to the screen. The air was thick with tension as the crew looked on, their weapons at the ready in case the Thackeray made one last attempt to stop them. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, and they could hear the aliens regrouping, preparing for one last assault. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the pod doors opened. "It's done," Sarah exclaimed. "We're good to go." Without another word, Andrews and his crew rushed into the escape pods, sealing the doors behind them. They didn't wait for the aliens to retaliate. They launched immediately, leaving the Seraphis behind as it began to disintegrate under the weight of its damaged systems. The ship had been sabotaged beyond repair, and as the humans blasted away from it, they could see the Thackeray's prized vessel slowly falling apart in the distance. "Earth's a long way from here," Andrews said, looking out at the vastness of space. "But we've made it. We've survived. And we've sent a message." The crew of the Seraphis sat in stunned silence as they watched the remnants of the alien ship fade into the distance. It was over. They had fought back, and they had won. The Thackeray had underestimated humanity, and it had cost them everything. They had made it off the ship. They had escaped. But as the pod sped toward Earth, Andrews couldn't help but wonder how long it would be before the Thackeray came after them again. The war was far from over, the ultimate victory. As the escape pods drifted farther and farther from the crumbling Seraphis, a sense of relief washed over the crew. They were safe, for now. The immediate threat of the Thackeray was behind them, but Captain Andrews knew that this was only the beginning. They had survived, but the war was far from over. The small pod shook slightly as it adjusted its course for Earth. The crew sat in silence, still processing everything that had just happened. They had been captured. They had fought back. And now, they were on their way home. But something gnawed at Andrews. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, more unsettling. A realization that this was just one battle in a much larger war. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice breaking the silence. She was sitting across from Captain Andrews, her face pale but resolute. "They will," Andrews replied, his voice firm. "The Thackeray will never forget this. But we've sent them a message. Humanity isn't weak. We fight back. We will always fight back." The words echoed in the small, cramped pod as the crew members exchanged uncertain looks. They had seen the wrath of the Thackeray firsthand, their technology, their ferocity, their endless hunger for conquest. But the humans had stood their ground. They had beaten the odds, defeated a superior force, and escaped. They had done what no one thought possible. But the Thackeray would be back. That much was clear. And when they returned, the humans would be ready. The days stretched on as the crew made their way back to Earth. They didn't speak much during the journey. Each person had their own thoughts, their own fears about what the future would hold. But in the quiet moments, Andrews found himself thinking about something else. About Earth. about how fragile their world was, how vulnerable they were, until now. What they had done wasn't just about surviving. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could be strong, that they could rise up against impossible odds and overcome them. The Hexakari may have underestimated them once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Andrews looked out the small window of the pod, his gaze fixed on the distant planet of Earth. It was beautiful from here, peaceful, untouched by the horrors of the galaxy. But it wouldn't stay that way. Not for long. The Hexakari would come. They would try to invade again. But humanity was no longer just an afterthought to the galaxy. They had proven their worth, and they would fight for their survival. "We've got a long road ahead," Andrews said quietly, speaking to the crew, though it was more to himself than anyone else. "But we're ready. We've shown them what humans are capable of." His crew nodded, the determination in their eyes clear. They had faced the unimaginable, and now they were stronger for it. They knew what had to be done. As the pod finally entered Earth's orbit, the crew saw the welcoming lights of their home planet. The sight was overwhelming. The planet they had fought for, the place they had protected against the dark forces of the universe. The ship may have been a wreck, but the crew was intact, and that was all that mattered. Captain Andrews sent out a distress signal to Earth's military, reporting the successful escape and giving them a warning about the Hexakari's future plans. The message was clear. Humanity had survived the first wave, but this wasn't the end. The Hexakari would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. As the escape pods made their final descent to Earth's surface, Andrews felt a strange mix of pride and anxiety. They had won this battle, but it was just a small victory in a much larger war. The Hexakari would learn to fear humanity. And this time, the humans wouldn't back down. They had proven that they were not weak. They had proven that they could be as ruthless and as determined as the strongest empire in the galaxy. The story of the Seraphis and its crew would go down in history as a testament to human resilience and bravery. But for Captain Andrews and his crew, it was just the beginning. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would never be conquered, never be made into hostages again. As the escape pods touched down on Earth, the sky was the same, the air just as sweet as they remembered. But for them, the world had changed. They weren't just survivors. They were warriors, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to face the might of humanity.